Okay, so welcome back to this channel. So now in this video we will learn that how we can Dockerize our MERN Stack application. We will handle both front end and back end with MongoDB database, and also we will handle both scenarios, the development and then the production. Okay, so let's start the video. First of all, you have to download the Docker on your computer. So simply go to docker.com, download that and install that on your computer. I have already installed that. You can see that in here Docker is running. After installing that, you simply have to go back to your application, and here you can see that I have simple application that contain two folders, backend and then the front end. So in the backend I have this index.js file that contains a simple express backend. You can see that in here, and the same way in the front end I have a React application that is totally empty at this moment. So this is our front end and this is our backend, and now we have to configure that for both. In the backend I will create a file that is going to be Dockerfile dot, I will call it backend, and then in the front end I can also create one more file that is going to be Dockerfile dot front end. So now in this front end we will write our front end instructions. In the back end we write our back end instructions. So first of all, let's handle the back end part. Okay, now we have to handle both part, the development and then the production in the same file. So we have in here the development stage in the back end, and then we have in here the production stage in the back end. So for the development, first of all, we know that in the Docker file we have to start from the base image. So our base image is going to be Node.js. So I will use in here from Node, then the version that is going to be 22-Alpine. So Alpine is the lightweight version of Node, and you can check that on Docker Hub. If I go back, I can search in here Node, okay, and you can simply click on this Node image, and then you can check the version in here. So you can see that I am using this 22 Alpine. So Alpine is the lightweight version of this image. You can use Alpine, or you can also remove that. Okay, so I will go back and I will use it as, then you have to give in here the stage name, that is optional. I will use in here dev. So this is going to be development stage. So I will type in here, this is the base image, that is Node.js, as dev, this is the stage name, and then we know that we have to define our working directory inside our container. So I will type in here define working directory in container, that is going to be work directory, and the path is going to be /app. Now remember that this /app is the working directory inside our Docker container, and I will show you that once we run our application. So this is our working directory inside our Docker container, and now we have to copy the backend package.json file, and then we have to install the node modules. So for that I will type in here copy package.json file to container. So I will simply copy the package.json file in /, which is the Docker container working directory, and you have to copy that from backend /package.json. okay, so we'll copy our package.json from the backend, copy that in the working directory, and then you have to install the node modules. So I will type in here npm run install, like this. So that will install the node modules inside our package.json in the Docker container. And now we have to copy our entire application in the Docker container. So for that I will type in here copy all files to container. So that is going to be copy backend /to dot. Okay, so this is the source and this is the destination. So I'm saying in here that copy the entire backend code inside the working directory in the container. So after copying that, we have to start our application in the development with the reloading. So for that we have to use nodemon. So I will type in here cmd, that is going to be, let's use in here npx, then I will use in here nodemon, and then we have to start our application. So our application main file is going to be the index.js, this one. Okay, so that will start the application with the nodemon, which is this index.js. So this is going to be development stage where we have these commands. In the same way we have to define the production. For the production I have to use this as base image, copy that, and that is going to be as prod. So this is going to be base image for the production also. And then again I have to define the working directory inside the production stage. I have to install the node modules. So I will copy this part, copy that, and I will put that right in here in the production stage. Okay, and after installing that I have to also copy all files to the container like this, and then I have to start my application in the production. So I will type in here start the app in production. So for that I can simply use in here command that is going to be node index.js, which is our this file. So this is going to be our, you can change that if you wanted to according to your application. So this is going to be production stage, and this is going to be development stage for the backend. Okay, and now in the same way we have to define our development and production stage in our front end, and then we will configure that in our Docker Compose. Okay, so I go in the front end, and here this is the Dockerfile dot front end. Again we have to define here the development stage, and then again we have to use in here node 22 alpine as dev. Okay, and then we have to copy our define our working directory inside the container, that is going to be app directory. Then we have to copy all the dependencies to container, that is going to be frontend slash package.json, and copy that in the working directory in the container. Then we have to install the node modules, and then we have to copy our entire application of the front end inside the Docker container. So I will copy the front end and put that in the current directory in the Docker container. Okay, and then we have to start our application, that is going to be npm start. We know that our React application starts with npm start, so that is going to be start app in dev. So this is going to be our development stage, and then we have our second stage, that is going to be build stage. In this file we are going to have three stages: one is going to be development, one is going to be build, and one is going to be production. So in the build, that is going to be build stage, I have already created a complete video on how to configure or how to dockerize our React application. I will add the link of that video in the description of this video. You can watch that also. In that I have also discussed all the scenarios of React. So again in here our working directory, our base image is going to be node, our working directory is going to be this. Then we have to install the node modules, copy the files, and then we have to, I will copy this part and I will put that in here, and then we have to type in here run npm run build, so that will build the application, and that is going to be build stage. Okay, so this is going to be our second stage, that is going to be build stage. In that we have simply built our application. Now we have to define our third stage, which is the production stage. In that we have to use this build and serve that with nginx server. Okay, so I will type in here that is going to be production stage, and for the production I will use nginx, and I will use in here the alpine version as prod. So if you don't know, this nginx is a simple web server that help us to basically serve our static files, so we can use that as our base image for the production. Okay, so we have used this nginx as our base image, and then we have to copy our files from this build stage because we have our build in this stage. So I will type in here copy from stage, and stage is going to be our build stage. Okay, and then we have to copy that, and then we have to copy that from app slash build because we have this build inside our build stage. So we will copy from that, from the app directory we will copy that and put that in the user share nginx and html folder, because we have to serve our files in this html folder in order to work with the nginx. So I will copy that inside this folder, and then we can start our nginx server. So I will type in here cmd, then I can type in here nginx like this, so that will start the server. And with this flag -g I can basically override the global configurations for nginx, and I will type in here daemon off. That will make sure that our application don't run in background, so that we can see the logs and all the stuff that is going on. Okay, so that is going to be our docker file on the front end for the development, and then for the production we have three different stages. Okay, now our docker files are ready for the backend and front end. Now we have to configure that in our docker compose file, that how we want to run these. So for that, in the root I will create docker dash compose.yaml file. In that we can write that, and also you can use docker build, you can build the images for that and run that one by one, but I will recommend using the docker compose. Here we can define all our services and we can handle that efficiently. Okay, now in that we are going to have our four services. One is going to be front-end development, then front-end production, then back-end development, then back-end production, and our fifth service is going to be DB, because this is a MERN Stack application, so we also have to take care of basically our MongoDB. So I can define in here my services. Okay, so let's first of all handle the DB one. So DB is going to be, this is the name of the service, this one. So in the DB I will type in here the image. So the image is going to be, oops, not MySQL, we have to define in here image, that is going to be Mongo, and then I will type in here latest. Okay, you can also search that on the Docker Hub. So this is going to be our image, that is going to be Mongo latest, because we are using MongoDB. as our database. Okay, and then we can define in here our let's say our ports. Okay, we know that by default the MongoDB run on port 27017, so we will map that like this. And then after port we have to also map our volumes. So for the volumes I have to use in here, I will type in here, let's say I will call it MERN underscore DB, and then we have to define this volume right in here. So I will type in here volumes, that is going to be this. So now we have defined our first service, that is going to be DB, in that our image is going to be Mongo latest because this is MongoDB. And then port, we have mapped the port, and then we have mapped the volume. And now this is the DB directory inside our container. So we have to use this MERN DB right in here, and we also have to find this volume right in here. Now this is must. If we don't define our volume in here, so what will happen is once we stop our container, we are going to lose all our data in the database. So what Docker will do is Docker will use this volume internally to persist our data. If we stop our container, we are not going to lose our data. So Docker will make sure that it persists our data in the database. So that's why we have to map our MERN DB. We have to find that in here. This is the volume, and we have mapped that to the DB folder inside our MongoDB. And if you don't know, we have to create DB folder inside data for MongoDB, and Docker will handle that for us. And you can change the name of this volume right in here. So I will use in here MERN-DB that use this volume to persist our data. So this is our first service. Now we have to define our second service, that is going to be backend development, then backend production, then front-end development, then front-end production. Okay, so now the first service is going to be backend-dev. Okay, now in that, first of all, I have to define here the build. In that I have to give the context. So context is going to be dot, which is the current directory, and then I have to give in here the docker file. So the docker file is going to be our, let's say, backend slash dockerfile dot backend. Okay, like this. Oops. So this is our service. In the build, I have given the context, that is the current directory, given the reference of the this is backend development. So I will give in here a backend slash dockerfile.backend. Okay, and then I have to type in here the stage that I want to target. So that is going to be target, that is going to be dev. Remember that we have different stages in here, that is dev and then the production. So we are running our application in development, so we have to target this stage. So it is must to target our development stage in here. And if you use in here development like this, so you have to type in here that one. Okay, so I will use here dev, so I have to use in here dev. So after giving the target, let's map our volume for live reload. So I will map my volume in here. So volume, that is going to be backend directory, and we will map that to the app directory inside our Docker container. And then we have to map our ports. So for the ports, I will use in here my application is running on the backend in port 4000, so I will map to port 4000 and then 4000. Okay, so this is the port that my application is using. I can change this port if I wanted to, but I will use in here 4000. And after the port, I can also define in here my environment variables. I can type in here environment like this. In that I can put in here node env, let's say is going to be development, and then I can also give in here, let's say, Mongo underscore URI, and I can define my Mongo URI in here. Let's say MongoDB, that is going to be DB, our DB service port 27017 slash, I will type in here MERN slash dev database. So in this way, we can also define our environment variables in our service. And then we can also define in here our depends on option. So that is going to be depends on service. Okay, so this is syntax that this service depends on DB. Okay, because this is our backend, we know that our database is on our backend, so we have to make sure that our DB service is up and running. So that's why I have to type in here that depends on DB, that makes sure that DB is started, and then we have to start this one. Okay, so this backend dev is dependent on our DB service. So this is going to be our backend dev service. Okay, in the same way we have to define our front end dev service. So for that I will copy this one just to save some time, copy that, and I can put that right in here like this, and that is going to be front end dev like this. In the context, that is going to be current directory, so that is going to be front end slash dockerfile dot front end. This is the docker file, and the target is going to be development stage that we have right in here, this one. Okay, and then we have to basically map the volume that is going to be front end to the app directory. And then for the port, we know that React app runs on port 3000, so I will use in here 3000 for development and also 3000. In the environment variable, I can set in here this to development node env, and also here for the React I can also set in here like this. So React underscore app underscore URI API URL. So let's say that is going to be HTTP localhost port 4000. So in this way you can also define your React variables in here like this API URL. Okay, and now I will remove this part from here, and this is going to be our front end dev. Okay, and now in the same way we can define our production stages, and before that let's test it out. So what I will do is, you can see that in the container I have nothing, so let's start my service. So for that I will type in here docker dash compose. So we have to use docker compose up to start it. Okay, so now docker compose up, and we have to start in here. Let's say first of all let's start the backend dev. So I will type in here backend dash dev. If I run it, you can see that now it is pulling my db. Okay, because we have in here database, so it will pull out this mongo image. Okay, so that's why we have to wait that until it's get downloaded. Okay, so let's wait. Okay, so you can see that our image is successfully pulled and downloaded, and you can see that in here all the steps are on the first step. It has used this node 2012 point image, then set the working directory, then copy the package or JSON file, install the node modules, and then it has simply copied my backend, and then it has started my backend only. And if I open that, you can see that my application is successfully running on port 4000. If I go back and I can change that something like hello world to let's say 11, save it, you can see that it is successfully changed. So our backend is running successfully. And if I go to my docker software, you can see that this is our docker container. If I click on that, so you can see that in here this mongo latest this mongodb service is running, and also this is our docker with MERN backend dev 1, and these are the logs. You can see that it is using nodemon. And if I go to my files in the app, you can see that this is our backend files. Okay, so this is our two services, because this depends on this basically backend depends on this db service, so that's why you can see that both are running. And now if I want to start both front end and then the back end, I can simply exit from here, or I can just start in here front end first. So I can type in here docker compose front end dev, and if I run that, so that will simply use node.js as base image. You can see that this one set the working directory, copy package or JSON file, install the node modules, and then start my front end. So you can see that front end application is started successfully right in here with the React app. Okay, and if I open that, you can see that here I have my React application. And if I go back to my VS Code, I can go to my source app.js. I can type anything here, like if I type it hello, save it, you can see that live reloading is successfully working. Okay, I can also log in here process .env.react app API URI. If I go back, you can see that we have our URI in here that we have set in our docker compose right in here. Okay, so now we have started the front end and then the back end, and we can also run both at the same time. And if I go to my docker back again, you can see that now this backend service is stopped and this front end is running. Okay, this is the front end. Okay, now I can start both. If I go back, I can simply type in here, let's say I want to start in here docker compose backend dash dev and then front end dev. If I run that, it will start both, and then you can see that the backend is started. Now if I go back, if I reload it, I can access that. If I reload it, I can access that. Both front end and back end are running. And if I go back to my VS Code, and here if I go to my docker compose.yml file, now this is a MERN Stack application, so I am sure that our both front end and back end is connected. Like you cannot start front end without back end, because you have your database on the back end and you will be sending the request from the front end to the back end. So it is obvious that you have to start back end first and then the front end. Okay, so what we can do is, instead of typing this command, this one that we have used right in here, that start the back end and then the front end, what we can do is we can use this depends on. Okay, so we know that our front end depends on the back end. If we start the front end, this means that our back end should be running. So what I can do in here is I can simply type that my front end, this one, depends on my back end. So that is going to be backend dash dev. Okay, so now if I start the front end, it will automatically start the backend. So if I start the backend, it will automatically start the DB because both are depending on each other. And now let's say I just want to start in here front end dash dev. And if I go back to my Docker, you can see that both services are not running. If I go back and run it, it will start. You can see that it will start the backend and then the front end. Okay. So now if I go back to my Chrome and if I reload the page, you can see that front end is running. If I go to backend is also running. If I go to my Docker, you can see that both backend and front end are running in development. So in this way, you can use depends on to make sure that if we start the front end, our backend also runs. Okay. You can also change the scripts if you wanted to. Like this is our front end. You can type in here, let's say np app dev, and you can call it backend. Okay, and once you start in here your application, you can use in here instead of this front end dev, you can type in here app dev. So that will run your entire application front end and back end like this. Okay, but I will keep it front end because I just want to show you that. Okay, so in this way we have our front end and back end, and now these are for development. Now we have to create two more services for the production. So for the backend production, I will copy this one, copy it from here, and I will put that before this DB. So I'll put that right in here. So that is going to be backend production. That is going to be target is going to be prod, and then Dockerfile dot backend, and then we don't need in here volume because this is production, so we don't have to map that because we don't need volume. We will use our build files, and by default our backend is going to be on 4000, so I will map it to port, let's say port 8080. Okay, I can set my environment variable, let's say to production, and I can also change in here my Mongo URI to MERN/prod for the production database. Okay, and it depends on DB. Okay, because in production we also need database. So this is going to be our backend production, and for the front end I will copy this one, this service, and I will put that right in here like this. So that is going to be front end production. In that we have to set the build context to dot front end production file, and here I will use target to prod, and we don't have to set the volume because we will use our build. Okay, and by default it is going to run on port 80 because we are using Nginx here. Remember that we have used Nginx right in here. So Nginx uses port 80 by default, but I will map it to, let's say, port 8000. Okay, and then we can set our environment variable to production. Okay, and let's say on production our backend API URI is port 8080, and it depends on front end dev. Okay, sorry, backend dev, not front end dev, like this. So this is going to be our front end and back end production. So now let's start that. So I will type in here. Now my front end production depends on the back end. So I will use this only, that will automatically start the back end. So I will copy this service name and I will start that. And now that will simply generate the build for the front end and also for the back end, and then start my application in the production. Okay. So you can see that it is following all the steps again. So npm run build for the front end, so it will generate the production build, and you can see that the process is successfully started. You can simply go back and I can go to here, let's say port 8080. If I open that, and that is going to be backend, sorry, that is going to be backend dash prod. Okay, like this. Okay, so now if I start it again, let's start it front end prod. Now we have to use in here backend prod. Okay, so now if I go back and if I reload the page, now you can see that we get in a hello world on port 8080, and for the front end we were using port 8000, so I will use in here port 8000, and now you can see that in here we have this front end that is running on port 8000. Okay, so in this way it is going to work. And now we have successfully handled our front end, back end in production and then in the development. I hope that you understand. You can also create one more file in here that is going to be .docker ignore file. Like we have .git ignore. You can type the file names in here that you don't want to push in the container. Like I can type in here backend slash, let's say, docker file dot backend. It will avoid that. Okay, in the same way you can define all the files. Okay, so now if I exit it from here and if I go back actually to my Docker, you can see that here we have these images. Okay, so this is the MongoDB and this is the backend in dev, this is the front end in dev, this is the backend in production, this is the front end in production. Okay, and now if I give you overview, first of all in the backend we have two stages, development stage and backend stage. So in the development we have set the node as base image, then we have set up a working directory, installed the node modules, copy our backend, started the application with the node-mon. In the production we have done the same, but we have used node to start my application in the production. In the Dockerfile.frontend, in the front end we have three stages. In the development we have to simply set the node as base image, set the working directory, install the node modules, copy my front end directory and start my application with npm start. In the build I just have to build my application, so I will use node as base image, give the name of the stage as build, set the working directory, install node modules, copy for front end, and then I will run this npm run build that will create optimized production build of React. And then in the last, which is the production stage, I have to copy all the build files from this build stage and I have to serve that with Nginx. And again, Nginx is a simple web server that help us to host static files. So I have to use in here Nginx as base image. The stage name is going to be prod, and in that we have to copy from the build stage, which is this one. I will copy from the build in the app/build. I will copy that, and I have to copy that from here and put that in the Nginx HTML folder in order to serve that. Okay, I will copy that, and then I have to start my Nginx server. So I will use here command Nginx that will start the Nginx server, and then I have used in here -g to configure the global configurations for Nginx, and I have given here one option that is daemon to off. This means that I don't want to run my application in the background. And this is our dockerfile.frontend. And now in the root we have created our docker compose.yaml, in that we have defined all the services that we can use. So our first service here is the DB, because this is a MERN Stack application, so we also have to handle the database. So service name is going to be DB, image is going to be Mongo latest, and then port is going to be, we will map the port to port 7017, which is the default port of MongoDB. And we have given here the volume. We have mapped the volume from MERN DB to the DB data inside the container. Now again we have defined the volume DB in here. Now this volume will be used by Docker internally to persist our data in the database. If we don't do that, we will lose all our data once we stop our container. So we have to do that. Okay. So this is our directory in our workspace that Docker will use internally, and then we have to map that to the DB inside our container. And this is going to be our DB service. And now let's go here. Here first of all we have our backend development service. In that we have given the context, that is the current directory, given our Docker file that is in the backend. Then the target is this development stage. Okay. And then we have mapped our volume for the library loading. This backend directory we have mapped that to the app directory inside the container. For the port, my application is running on port 4000, and I will map that to the 4000. And then you can also define your environment variables right in here, like I have defined in here node env mongo URI. Okay. And then at the end I also have given here depends on. This backend development service depends on DB, because on the backend I have to use database. So I have to make sure that my DB service is up and running before running this backend dev. So I have type in here depends on DB service. So it will make sure that our DB service runs, and then we will run this one. Okay. So this is the backend dev. In the same way we have the front end dev, in which you have to give the context, Docker file, target is going to be dev. And then we have to again map the volume for the library loading. And this is our front end in our basically workspace, and this is the app directory inside our container. So we will map that for the library loading. By default React runs on port 3000, so we will map that, set the environment variables, and then this front end depends on this backend service, because this is a MERN Stack application. If we start the front end, definitely we also have to make sure that our backend is running, because we have to send our request to the backend to our API. Okay. So my front end is depending on the backend app. So if we start this service, it will automatically start the DB and then the backend development service. Okay. So in this way it is going to work. In the same way, we have this backend production and front end production. In that we have given the context, target is prod, map the port to 8080 for the backend, set the environment variables, and now this also depends on DB because this is backend. On the front end, I have given here target to prod. By default, I am using here Nginx to serve my front end. So by default, Nginx uses port 80. I will map that to port 8000 like I have right in here. You can see that. Okay. And then I have set here environment variables, and then it depends on the backend prod. If I start this, it will automatically start the backend production. So in this way, this Docker Compose is going to work. I hope that you understand. So we have successfully learned that how we can Dockerize our MERN Stack application both for the production, then the development, and also for the front end and then the back end. Okay. So that's it for this video. I hope that you understand. If you have any question, you can post in the comment section. I will try my best to reply, and you can get the source code git repo link of this in the description of this video. And that's it for this video. I will see you in some other video.